I'll get my headset. So earlier this year, Sony released their newest virtual reality system, the PSVR 2, and boy, do people seem to like this thing. They talk about how good its graphics are and how well it tracks your motion. And oh, they won't shut up about how it tracks your eyeballs. And this helps to make sure it uses its power in the most efficient way possible, making the experience that much better. It's just great. And if it's so great, you're probably wondering, why do you detect just an ever so slight bit of saltiness in my voice? Well, my friends, that's because I do not have a PSVR 2. No, my friends, I'm stuck with this hunk of junk, the PSVR 1. Ow! So I got to it thinking, if I have to be jealous, those PSVR 2 jerks have to be jealous as well. And here's how I'm going to do that. I'm going to talk about the future of virtual reality, the technology that is not here yet. That way, I don't have it, but they don't have it either, so they too will be jealous. That's right, folks. I'm petty. And we're not just going to talk about your expected improvements to VR, like better graphics and enhanced motion tracking and anti-strangling technology. No, my friends, we're going to talk about potentially revolutionary changes that might be coming to this technology someday. And without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into our first technology. What the fun fiddly femur is? Oh, that's right. That's just my skeptical alarm. You see, my friends, today we're talking about future technology, and while that technology is exciting and very cool to talk about, and in some cases promising, it's ultimately not here yet. And because of that, there are plenty of bumps in the road we might encounter along the way, and in some cases, we don't know what those bumps are until we get to them. So yes, be excited, think these technologies are really cool, be amazed, but at the same time, have a healthy degree of pessimism because, who knows, these may never come out on a wide scale. Okay, now that that's out of the way, we can move on to making those PSVR 2 jerks jealous with our first technology, which uses these things right here, and the only thing that they're really good for, which is, of course, touch. And I know what you're thinking. Oh, hands can do way more than just touch things. They can also hold things. You want to know what my hands just did? You want to know what they just did? I was about to sit down at the TV with a bowl of nuts and enjoy a baseball game. And here's what my hands did. All over the floor. An absolute mess. They're good for nothing but touch. Now, yes, I know, touch is not entirely new to the VR world. After all, you see that with PSVR 2. The controllers have haptic feedback. But I'm talking about touch on an entirely new scale. This idea comes from City University in Hong Kong. And their idea is to use tiny electrodes that can be attached to your palm with hydrogel. This makes them ultra lightweight and ultra flexible. They then have a small driver that attaches further up your arm. Again, it's very small, minimally intrusive, but it does help control those electrodes. What do those electrodes do? Well, what those electrodes do is they provide electrical stimulation to your hands. And when done in the correct way, they can make it feel like you're touching something, like, I don't know, a cactus or just the most adorable little mouse. But this technology gets even cooler because the system can be customized for every individual that uses it. After all, we all have different hand sensitivities, so that array of electrodes is going to have to provide more or less stimulation depending on how sensitive your hands are. For example, your hands might be pretty sensitive, so you wouldn't need much electrical stimulation to have that sensation of touch in your hand. Meanwhile, for me, my hands are not quite so sensitive ever since my anti-oven mitt phase, so I would, yeah, you'd have to max that sucker out.
What we do is if we need that extra push over the cliff, you know what we do?
Put it up to 11.
11, exactly.
The researchers call this Skin VR, and honestly, I'm excited to see how this technology is used. For me, it seems like a big step for VR, but not an impossible one. It's right in that sweet spot. So I'll be keeping an eye on that. But what if that ultra flexible, ultra lightweight technology is still just too much for you and you don't want to be touching anything physical? Well, my friends, come on over here because boy, do I have a piece of crap for you. Yeah, folks, welcome to the world of haptic holograms. These are pretty much exactly what they sound like. You're not physically wearing anything or physically touching anything. Instead, it's basically an illusion.
Well, that was a wonderfully ambiguous statement, you disappointing past incarnation of myself. All forms of VR are just an illusion. That's what makes it VR. What I think you meant to say was that in this particular case, the user does not have to hold a controller or wear a glove or stick electrodes on their hand. For this particular technology, all that the user is actually touching in the real world is air. And that's what makes this special. Now I'm going to let you take it from here, but if you say something silly again, we're going to have words.
So how does this work? Well, what you do is you take an array of ultrasonic speakers and put them around a contained space. And what those speakers do is they work alongside each other and they all create just the right amount of sound in the right direction so that those sound waves come together in a specific spot. And keep in mind, all those sound waves are vibrations. So you have this sweet spot of vibration going on in the middle of this array. And then when you reach your hand in there to where that vibration is happening, it feels like you're touching something. At least that's how it works in principle, but I have some serious reservations about this technology. First of all, it's been around about 10 years, at least as far as I can tell, and it doesn't really seem to have made that much progress in that time. But the real deal breaker for me was the fact that one of the very first articles I read about this technology was a bunch of scientists basically talking about why it's a piece of crap. Well, that might be a bit extreme, but the scientists did talk about some physical limitations to these sound waves working together. As a matter of fact, they described the sensation that someone would feel as a puff of air, which is a far cry from a truly immersive video game experience. So yes, this sounds really cool. I like the idea of you not having to wear anything. I don't know, though, if this is going to go anywhere. And if it does, I don't know if it'd really be feasible to set something up in a gaming space. If it does end up developing into something more, and they do overcome some of those hurdles, I can see this being used in a place like a museum for education. But enough of these things here. We're ready to move on to a whole new sense, which of course is this sense right here. That's right, folks, smell. And I know you've heard of smell-o-vision before, which honestly sounds stupid to me, but I don't know if it's quite as stupid if you're in a VR environment. Now, like the haptic holograms, this isn't an entirely new idea. As I said, just think about smell-o-vision. The idea has been around for a while, but one of the more recent attempts at this seems really interesting to me. What the inventors did was they created a device that you can hold up to your nose, and that device has 4 different smell chambers inside of it, and a fan that blows those smells towards your nose. And what it does is it mixes those smells together in different ratios, and when you smell it, you can create a wide array of different smells.
Hey there, old buddy, it's me again. Listen, I ain't gonna hold this one against you because it ultimately comes down to some articles that were published after you already wrote the script for this. But what you're about to say is pointless. You're about to criticize this specific attempt at bringing smell to VR for things that other inventors doing their own thing have already addressed. So, what you've already said is fine, but what you're about to say is not. We're going to fast forward through it.
Which I guess I disagree with the authors on.
Oh, and for all of you who are wondering why I'm dubbing over these parts and not just doing a couple of reshoots, I have my reasons.
Weirdly enough. But imagine this, instead of some kind of gimmicky game where you walk up and smell different things, imagine that you're walking around a beautiful field and it smells like flowers. Or imagine that you're in a city and you can get whiffs of hot dogs or whatever else happens to be around out there. Or if you want to get really gross, you go into a sewer as part of a video game and you smell the sewer.
It stinks. It stinks. It stinks.
All of it happening kind of in the background. Instead of you having to actively walk up and smell something, it's just sort of there. It's part of the environment. And I think that could make for a really cool immersive experience, which is why I definitely wanted to feature this technology here in my video. Which brings me to a crisis of conscience. Because you see, as much as I would like to make those PSVR2 jerks jealous, I've come across some technologies that aren't really good for video games, but are better for humanity. And I feel like I should talk about those, ethically speaking. But of course, that wouldn't make them jealous. It'd probably just make them feel warm and fuzzy. Unless, by talking about those technologies, the ones that are good for humanity, I come across as a really good person. A person that cares about the world. A person that stands above these petty disagreements. Yes, I could do that. I would come across as the better person then. Yes, standing far above those PSVR2 jerks, I would have the moral high ground. Yes, yes, yes. This is perfect. This is what I will do. And yes, folks, I am that petty. Let me give you an example. This comes from UCLA, where the authors wondered if you could use VR to enhance learning. You see, they were curious about context-specific learning, which basically means learning different ideas in different environments. So, what they did was they had test subjects, and they had those test subjects learn 2 different languages. But those test subjects learned those languages in different environments using VR. What the first group did was they learned both languages in the same environment. But the second group, they learned one language in one environment and the other language in the second environment. And as it turns out, the second group, they learned those languages better. Yes, that second group that learned languages in different environments retained 92% of the vocab that they were taught. Meanwhile, those that were taught the languages in the same environment only retained 76% of the words. But the researchers weren't necessarily using this to look at just languages. They can see this idea being used for other topics and subjects as well. Imagine this, instead of just walking into a science classroom and learning about outer space, you walk into that science classroom, pop on your headset, and then you're transported to outer space. You learn about space in space. And then you go off to history class. You don't just walk into a history classroom, you walk into a history classroom, put on your VR headset, and boom, just like that, you're at the signing of the Declaration of Independence, or some other major historical event. The point being, you're learning different subjects and different topics in different environments, which as seen in this study and in other studies, is better for the learning experience. But we can do even more than that. Imagine someone who is struggling from substance abuse, and you want to get them off of that drug. Well, one of the ways that you can do that is by helping them imagine different futures depending on the decisions that they make. How do you help someone imagine different futures in a really immersive way? That's right, this thing here. VR can help those struggling imagine a better future for themselves, which can actually make it less likely for them to relapse, especially in the early stages of trying to quit. But we're not even done yet. What about detecting cognitive decline and diseases such as Alzheimer's? Well, as it turns out, VR could very well be used for that as well. One particular study I saw used this to create a virtual shopping experience where people were told to collect 12 different items from the shop. And what they could do is watch as they walked around the shop. They could see how long it took them to recall those items, as well as how they performed at the checkout line, as well as when it came to ordering coffee. All of this happening in a virtual reality environment. It's an immersive experience for whoever is being evaluated, which sure is good for them, but is also really good for whoever might be diagnosing them, because it gives them a much better insight into how that person behaves in real life, instead of trying to gauge that from very artificial tests in a lab or in a doctor's office. And I could just keep going on and on about how VR might be used to help people. It's really exciting and very cool to see this being done. Yes, it's great for video games, and I want it to keep being used in that way. But also, we shouldn't forget that it can be used for some real good as well. And maybe that's something I should keep in mind as well. Maybe I shouldn't be trying to make those PSVR2 owners jealous by showing off new technology that's bright and shiny. Maybe my time would be better spent celebrating how VR can be used to help people. Even if it's not the newest, greatest thing, it can still do some real good in this world. And maybe I should focus on celebrating that instead of being jealous of those who have a little bit more than me. Okay, how did this happen?